Thanks. Hi, everyone. Welcome in. Feel free to, if you want to introduce yourself, either come off mute or throw your name and pronouns and where you live in the chat. We'll give it a couple minutes for everybody to join. Good to see you, Rich. You've probably seen me do the spiel before.
I can't recall, but I'm sure you're familiar with doing it.
Did you finally get the data center toolkit, Rich?
Yes, I did, and I passed it along.
Hallelujah.
Yes, Jen was nice enough to do that, and I passed it to the two co-chairs of our building electrification committee.
Sorry, I
And
had to go through all that. I tried.
I know, and I think Angela has it too, the most recent one, so whatever. And it's internal document, made that very clear. It's an internal document, period.
Great. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. My name's Dan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm with the National Sierra Club, the state lobby team. I work with chapters all the way from here in North Carolina, where I'm based, up to Maine. But I'm from New Jersey originally, so super happy to be here supporting this work with you all. Tonight, we're gonna have a training to get us ready for the People Over Plastics Advocacy Day. So with that, let's get the slide started, Taylor, and thanks. So we're just a quick overview of what we'll be talking about tonight. We'll have agenda and logistics for the day. We'll go over telling your story. We have our head, heart, and hand method. Some best practices for lobbying, do's and don'ts. I'm gonna mute someone. Judith, you don't mind muting, thanks. We're gonna go over the bills as well. And then we'll talk about the experience of holding a lobby meeting. And before I go on, Taylor or anyone else, I shouldn't skip over it. Do you all want to introduce yourselves as well?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and really excited about May 22nd. I'm Taylor McFarland. I'm the Conservation Program Manager for the New Jersey chapter, and hopefully I will see you all on May 22nd.
And I'm Judith Enck. I'm the president of an organization called Beyond Plastics. You can check us out at beyondplastics.org. I enjoy working with Sierra Club all over the country. Currently, I'm in the state legislature in Albany, where we are working on a New York EPR bill that is getting very, very close, and we're excited about that. And I previously served as EPA Region 2 Regional Administrator appointed by President Obama, and am really excited to see Sierra Club in New Jersey interested in packaging reduction. And I really want to thank Taylor for just really doing phenomenal work, not only with this tonight, but in general. She's a force, and I'm really honored to be working with her.
Thanks, Judith. Likewise.
I double that about Taylor. My name is Marta Young, for those people who don't know me. I'm the Zero Waste Specialist for Clean Water Action here in New Jersey. Excited to talk about some of the plastics work that we're all doing, and thank you very much for being here. Appreciate everybody's time and energy on trying to make this place a better place.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to jump in on my accolades to Taylor. Thanks for pulling this together. Well, my name is Nandini Checco. My nickname is Dini, and I'm with the Association New Jersey Environmental Commissions. I'm one of the project directors there and been working on reducing plastics and other waste for many years there. So welcome. Happy to see you all.
Great. Is that everybody? If so, let's go to the next slide. So I just want to review the agenda for the day so you can have a good sense of how the day will flow. We'll be asking folks to arrive by 9 a.m. for check-in, and we'll be meeting in the cafeteria of the State House, which is on the first floor of the annex building next to the State House. If you don't know how to find that, I would recommend just asking someone at the front desk. It was tricky to find last time I was there. And during this first beginning of the day, you'll get to touch base with your lobby group, which is going to include anyone in your district or nearby districts. You're going to get legislator sheets, which will have info about your legislators and sort of like a little bit of biographical info, what committees they're on, et cetera, as well as a place to write notes about your meeting with the legislators. We'll take some time to review the bills again, answer any last minute questions during this beginning of the day, and then we will get into actual lobbying at 9:45. Some scheduled meetings will take place. We're working on scheduling those now and have a few scheduled so far. And outside of that, we'll just be working on lobbying in the hallways. We'll be going to the committees, seeing if we can catch folks there. It's, of course, the more traditional way of lobbying, so there's really nothing wrong with that. If you don't have a scheduled meeting, showing up at the committee and trying to catch your legislator there is also a great way to do it. And we'll have fact sheets for you to leave behind with the legislator or their staff in case they don't have the time to meet. The committees that are happening that day, Taylor, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I gathered it was environment, education, and economic growth. Great. And, folks like Taylor and the others who've introduced themselves are going to be there that day to help you find the committees and tell you where to go so you know where to find people. At 11, we will prepare for the rally. Is the location still TBD on that? Or do we have more? Okay. Location of the rally is TBD, but obviously by the day of, we will have clarity on that. I just want to note also that we're asking folks to bring your own lunch or snacks, so that might be a good time to get a few bites in. There's not a super clear designated time to like sit down and have lunch, so whenever you can, and that might be a good time. 11:30, we'll have the rally and press conference. And then after that, we have more lobbying, 12:45 through the end of the day. Same as before, with some scheduled meetings and some lobbying legislators throughout the building and at committees. And then we'll do, if you all want to do it this way, a wrap up to just debrief and talk about next steps around 3:30. We can go to the next slide unless there's anything folks want to add to that. The transportation situation, we always like to go over. So there will be, of course, we encourage carpooling, and I always like to use this space here to ask folks if you want to carpool. People are coming in from all over the state, and you want to know like who here is coming from your area. Throw your name in the chat and where you're coming from, and maybe like your phone or email if you're willing to share it, so you can connect with folks to carpool. And there's garage parking located at the rear entrance off Route 29. There's metered street parking on West State Street and other pay lots located within walking distance. And if you're doing train, there's direct rail service to Trenton via MJ Transit and Amtrak, and MJ Transit bus service to and within Trenton. And it's a 10-minute walk from the train station to the State House for those who haven't been before. I think that's it for transportation. Taylor, something else to add?
Just to add, we are going to be sending you, obviously this is being recorded, so we will send you the recording of this, but we will also be sending you a packet of information on how to get to the State House with a map, a fun video, because there is a new way to get to the State House. Since there are a lot of volunteers, hopefully we'll have some volunteers in areas to help you guide your way into the State House. But again, there's going to be more detailed information being sent to you via email on how to get into the State House, because it is a bit of a maze.
All right, we can go to the next one. All right, so now we're going to get into a little more of the mechanics of lobbying, just some best practices and a sort of a fun method for how to do it. We can go to the next one. So we have what's called the heart, head, and hand. I didn't come up with this. It is a time-tested method from the state lobby team and probably elsewhere as well. So, you know, we like to say our inclination is to approach lobbying by inundating people with facts, but we know that more often than not, people are going to actually understand and connect with you better if you have provide some emotion first. So the first piece is the heart. When you're meeting with legislators, this is the part where you make the issues relatable by telling a story. So you tell the legislator why you care about a particular issue on a personal level, how it relates to your life. An example I have is a coworker of mine uses the story of her asthmatic brother when she's lobbying on clean energy, clean air issues. As a child, you know, growing up, this coworker of mine frequently experienced the trauma of seeing her brother have asthmatic episodes and go through breathing troubles that were worsened by poor air quality. So that's the story that she anchors her lobby meetings in, particularly obviously those dealing with clean air, clean energy, and why we need to move away from dirty sources of energy. So she anchors it in that. If you don't have a personal anecdote as specific as this, that's totally fine as well. You can take a broader approach and simply talk about why you have an interest in this or a personal investment. Maybe you have kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, and you just want them to have a safer, healthier, less polluted planet or state, even in New Jersey. Maybe you have a body of water or a landscape that you have a strong connection with in New Jersey. And since we're talking about plastic, you want to make sure it remains accessible to patients. It's not overly polluted by plastic and PFAS chemicals. So it can be broad, it can be a broad appeal to the heart as well. The next piece is the head, where we're going to give a few facts about the issue and how the bill addresses the issue. Emphasis here on a few. It does not need to be a full-length dissertation. In fact, the shorter the better usually. And we're going to be providing you fact sheets as well when we get to that section later in the presentation. A best practice is to keep facts relevant to the issue and whenever possible relevant to the entity that you're lobbying. So the same coworker I was just talking about, she learned that the legislator she was going to be meeting with really cared about butterflies and had a butterfly garden at her home. So she went into the meeting about a climate and clean energy bill prepared with facts about how climate change was negatively affecting butterflies in the state. And that really helped catch the legislator's attention and helped her care about climate change as an issue, which she didn't seem to care as much before when she heard about how it was impacting butterflies. So that's the head section. And finally, the hand is making the appeal or making the ask. You want to be clear about the action you want the legislator to take. When we go over bills in a few minutes here, we're going to talk about what that action is. But if you can boil it down to a yes or no question, that is always the goal. So will you support or will you oppose, depending on the bill? Or if, you know, will you bring this up with the committee chair and ask them to prioritize this bill? Whatever the ask is, you want to try and boil it down as specific as you can to that. Because we know legislators don't like to make a commitment usually then and there. So and feel free to hold the silence as well. If you make the ask, it's maybe a little bit awkward. My coworker always recommends counting to 10 after making the ask, which is a long time. But it's important to make them feel the pressure that you're expecting an answer and that you want them to make a commitment to support or oppose the bill at hand. Let's see if I have anything else there. I think that's it for that slide. We can go to the next. A few more best practices to mention. The first is more of a recommended best practice, not as much of a hard and fast rule. Try and be clear about who is speaking on what topics and when in your meetings. So ideally during the first part of the day, you'll have a chance to meet with anyone else who's in your district or in your group, and you can decide who's going to talk about which bill, who's going to make an ask, you know, who, if someone wants to be the note taker, that's another role that you could take on. And you'll have, like I said, you'll have time, not just in the morning, but also throughout the day. It's not like you'll be doing constant meetings to go over that with your partners. Don't talk about your opponents unless you are asked. That's a big one, and I've made this mistake many times. We don't want to make their arguments for them, and if they're brought up, try to divert as quickly as possible. We don't want to say things our opponents in such and such industry believe this, but it's not true. Don't even go there. Just skip the opponents altogether and make your own arguments. You don't want to open up a conversation about the opponent's arguments and reinforce their position by accident. Don't make things up. You can be comfortable with saying, I don't know. You know, they're not necessarily expecting you to be experts. You're citizens who care about the issue. Be a trusted source, though. You know, you don't want them going back and saying, I was told something that wasn't true by this constituent, and then losing the trust there. That's where I also note that we'll have those sheets that I mentioned that has like your legislator's picture and their info, but then on the back, there will be a chance to write notes about the meeting. And that's a great place to put like, so-and-so legislator wants to know this about plastic. And we can compile that later and send them an email to follow up and answer their questions. Definitely don't wander. You want to get to the heart of the issue, and I'm doing my best to do that here as well. You're sometimes only going to have a minute, 2 minutes, you're walking in the hallway with the legislator. And so you're not going to have a ton of time to get to the ask and to get to the point. So that's going to be something you're going to have to make a judgment call on. If you have a sit-down meeting that's scheduled, yes, you might have time to really get into it and tell your story in full and go into all the facts. But if not, you want to really make sure you get to the heart of the issue as quickly as possible. We also say avoid jargon, because sometimes it's easy to assume that the legislators are educated on these topics, but more often than not, they're not. I know that from personal experience. They just have hundreds of bills and topics that they're being lobbied on. And so avoid jargon when you can, because they may not understand you. They may be nodding their head, but they might not know what the heck you're talking about. They might just be trying to be nice. Sometimes you'll speak to the staffer and not the legislator, and sometimes people think that's not super important. You don't know. In some cases, the staffer is actually in charge more than the legislator. So take those meetings seriously as well, and give them just the same information you would a legislator. I will say, let's move on to the next slide. And before we get into the practice, does anyone have any questions so far? Or we can put them in the chat or save them for the end as well. All right. Let's do the practice exercise. This one's always fun. Can we go to the next slide? That's my dog, Pluto. You might be wondering why he's there. But there's a story here, and I'll keep it brief. But for years before I was married to my wife, Anisha, she tried to convince me to get a dog, and not having grown up with one, I didn't think it was worth it. I thought it was a lot of responsibility, this big scary thing, and it would get in the way of all the hobbies that I have outside of work. But she lobbied me really well and successfully. And she used the heart, head, and hand method to get the job done, basically. So the heart messages that she used were things like, I've always wanted to get a dog of my own. Some of my most precious memories, from my childhood are being with the dog, and it's, having this loyal companion has played such a part in who I am, making me the person I am today. Or we'd be watching a movie and she would just sneak in like, wouldn't it be so great if there was a sweet, loving dog, furry animal lying next to us right now? So she was really appealing to the heart with those appeals. And then she would throw in facts, the head message, like she would even cite studies about how, a dog is great for your health and it improves life expectancy. It's great for your cardiovascular health because you walk a lot. And then would make the direct ask, can we get a dog? And it was definitely a very successful lobbying effort. I was wrong all along. I love having the dog. It's basically half my personality now. So that is my story there of successful lobbying. And usually we ask if anyone wants to come off mute and practice that method. You could be lobbying a friend or significant other to convince them of something, or it could be getting a dog, or it could be something else. Or if you want to practice your story, anything like that. Is anyone feeling brave tonight? I wish I had the interlude music. All right, no takers. Bummer. Should really come up with an alternative thing for when there's no takers. Anyway, I think you get the point. You can practice in your own time as well. And now we can move to the next part, which is where we're going to actually talk about the bills. And I'm going to pass it over to Judith. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Go for it.
Thank you, Dan. That was a really great overview. I think I'm going to try the dog thing, although I don't have a dog. So, but I'll try.
Oh, that's fine.
I'll try
More
another
power to you.
example. So, plastics is in the news. I started working on it because of the impact on the ocean and environmental justice and climate change, and the fact that we love recycling, but plastic recycling doesn't work. It clocks in at an abysmal 5 to 6% recycling rate, and it's made from fossil fuels and 16,000 different chemicals. But plastics and health is now having a moment. It seems like every few weeks, there's another peer-reviewed scientific paper documenting the presence of plastics in different parts of our bodies. And lawmakers are paying attention to this. So there are plastics in our blood, in our brain, in our heart arteries, in our liver, our kidneys, in male testicles, in the human placenta, and breast milk. And this science is just building up at a rapid pace. And what it should do is encourage lawmakers to adopt laws to reduce plastic packaging for starters. So what this bill does is require that companies reduce single-use packaging by 50% over a 10-year period. It's very reasonable. When I worked in the New York governor's office and in the EPA, I learned that long-term aspirational goals sometimes don't work. What you really need is something, a glide path. So this bill is 10% reduction, then 20% reduction, then 40% reduction over 2-year chunks. And then you check in. If you're not hitting the statutory goals, you can make adjustments. So this is, we're not eliminating all single-use plastic packaging. We're just trying to eliminate half of it over 10 years. And whatever is left should be recyclable. So this will obviously prompt a real shift toward first waste reduction, then refill reuse, and then shifting toward materials. We don't need a space age breakthrough. We just need metal, glass, paper, cardboard. That's all easily recyclable. The other key provision of this bill is phasing out the 14 most toxic chemicals used in packaging. And remember, this is packaging that touches our food and our beverages. This also is incredibly modest because 16,000 chemicals are used to make plastics. And we're talking about PFAS chemicals being phased out over 3 years, formaldehyde, vinyl chloride, lead, mercury, I don't know about you, but I do not want formaldehyde in my food packaging. Third key provision, which is so exciting, is it puts a fee on packaging, and it's a $1 million word. It's a eco-modulated fee. So if your packaging is refillable, reusable, you typically wouldn't pay much of a fee. If it's a multi-material plastic packaging, for instance, you would pay a higher fee because it costs more to dispose of that. So we're going to have new money available to both local governments and customers of private waste haulers to manage recycling and of packaging or reuse refill. So I am most excited about the reduction part of this bill. We need money to build the reuse refill infrastructure. So what are some examples? You've probably been in an airport and you have your metal water bottle and you can refill it in a water refill station. Why don't we have those water refill stations in all of our parks and also in train stations and bus stations that people with more limited income tend to use? We could, but it takes money to install that and do the plumbing. You probably have children or grandchildren that go to school and eat their breakfast or lunch on single-use plastic packaging with plastic utensils. They're getting exposed to microplastics. Let's shift to reusable, durable dishes, which means purchasing dishwashing equipment. It's not inexpensive. And so this funding stream could allow schools, for instance, to purchase dishwashing equipment and real durable dishes. The final provision, and there are many, many more provisions. I'm just going to give you the high points. The final provision is so important. People are finally recognizing that plastics recycling doesn't work. And it's because there are too many different colors, too many different chemicals, too many different plastic types called polymers. And the plastics industry has deceived the public about plastics recycling for decades. In fact, the California Attorney General, Rob Bonta, has telling the truth about plastics recycling. So what are they doing now? The plastics and chemical and fossil fuel industry is promoting something called chemical recycling, also known as advanced recycling. And basically what that means is they heat up plastic to a really high temperature and then mostly convert it into fossil fuel, the last thing we need. This bill doesn't ban chemical recycling, although I think we should do a separate bill to do that. This bill simply says that chemical recycling cannot count as real recycling. And the way you do that is you have a really tight definition in the bill, which it has, on what real recycling is. So there's a lot more to this. The bill has passed the assembly committees in both the Senate and the Assembly. We want to have a race with you with New York to see who can pass it first. Although we've been working on it a couple years longer in New York. And the final thing I want to say is that this is transformational. This is not business as usual. None of us voted for more plastic. And the only way we can solve the plastic pollution crisis is by making less plastic. And plastic packaging is a really good and healthy way to start. So I'll hang out and take some more questions. And I apologize if I'm jumping up and down because New York legislators keep walking by me and asking me questions about the New York bill. So thanks for coming tonight. And I think working together, we can change the world on this in New Jersey.
Great. Does anyone have any questions? I do, but I want to let others go first. My question, Judith, for you is around the subbing out single-use plastics in schools for dishwashing. Like, is there a cost? Have there been cost analyses done on that? I'm always curious because it seems like you're buying plastic packaging over many, many years. You're probably losing money. So curious if that exists out there that you know of.
Yeah, well, Marta Young, thankfully, is the expert on that because Clean Water Action has a great campaign called Rethink Disposables. But Dan, you're absolutely right. When packaging day after day, not only are you filling up landfills and incinerators, often cited in environmental justice communities, but you've got to buy this stuff all the time. So the tricky thing is the initial expense of buying the durable dishes and the dishwashing equipment is a big hit, but it pays for itself over time. And Marta knows far more about this, and she's done case studies illustrating this.
Thank you, Judith. I'll jump in real quick on that. We have case studies for schools. A new one just came out from a colleague of mine in Massachusetts, for a school that saved, I think it was 12,000 annually, by just not needing to constantly buy the single-use dishes. But there's also the thing that's I think it gets ignored a lot is there's a $20,000 annual saving from waste hauling alone. So the numbers can get complicated, but it's all in the favor of reuse. Here in New Jersey, I've done a lot of work with case studies for soup kitchens and Meals on Wheels, and but for schools specifically, that Bedford, Massachusetts case study is a good one to quote.
Can I just
like
ask
Heidi has a
if there's
question.
been
Oh, go ahead.
if there have been case studies comparing doing the washing and actually using actual silverware and real dishes compared to switching to bamboo based like they do in Europe?
Yes, we have case studies. I mean, we don't do the one-to-one on bamboo for instance, but the bamboo is single use. So you'd have to buy that bamboo, which is more expensive than the plastic, and then would be throwing it away after each use. I actually had phone calls today with a couple national parks, because the national parks, Mammoth Cave and Petrified Forest and a couple others, are in the process of doing 100% switches from single use to reusables. So divergent from what we're talking about here with EPR. So I don't want to take up the whole time talking about that, but would love to chat with people more. Taylor can be nodding.
And Heidi's had their hand up. If you want to jump in.
Hi, my first question was answered in the chat. So I was asking if labor cost would also be covered for using the dishwasher. Seems like it doesn't cover that, but that the savings would make up for that. And so my second question was, why does it matter if something counts as recycling or not?
Because the most important provision of this bill, I think, is actually reducing single-use plastic packaging by 50% over 10 years. And then for the 50% of packaging that's left, it needs to be recyclable. So we don't want chemical recycling to count as material being recyclable, because it's just a really polluting technology to make mostly fossil fuel, and then creates toxic waste in the environmental justice communities where a lot of these facilities are sited. And you've got a very cute kid behind you.
Let's go to the next bill, just being mindful of time. And Taylor, did you want to cover this, or Judith?
I'm it.
Marta's taking.
Oh, sorry, Marta.
This
Sorry.
is Marta's. This is Marta's. Yes.
This is my little baby. But as someone said in the chat, it's a team effort. So this is a great example of a no-brainer of a bill. Lots of people have used that term because Skip the Stuff has the concept of Skip the Stuff is that when you go to restaurants or other businesses, schools, you only get cutlery and condiments upon request. So at the local level, there were a handful of ordinances that were passed back in our bag ban days. But last year alone, we added we got up to 17. We're now up to 20. There's about 20 other towns that are eager and ready to, pass local ordinances. I think there's 2 or 3 more in the next month that will be passing. At the state level, which is what we're going to be talking about, it's going to be the strongest bill in the country because it not only applies, this will actually be stronger than the local ordinances, which is unusual, but it's going to apply to both takeout as well as dine in with when businesses have a capacity of 25 or more. Again, it's a no-brainer of a bill. I'm going back to what Dan had said with the personal story. I love that. I grew up camping, spending a lot of time in the car, driving to see family members, grandparents, and whatnot. We never had plastic. We always had reusables. And as Judith said, the amount of toxics that can leach from any sort of plastic, let alone the spoon that, we're putting in our mouth, the fork, how many times do you suck on that fork, suck on the spoon, your kids might chew on it. It's unnecessary. I'm a geologist by background, and I think I was raised not using single use, but I think it took when I was working for, to Dan's story, I was a project manager geologist for one of the largest engineering firms, Parsons, and I was doing site investigation, site remediation. And for years I was working at this one particular area. I won't say where it is, but ultimately after doing a bunch of drilling and soil sampling and bedrock sampling, and even there was of course, a creek that went by. We ended up tearing down all 19 homes on the 7 acres because it was all contaminated with a whole bunch of nasty stuff. And I'll never forget the man that looked me in the eye and pointed at every other home and said, I have a neurological disease. This person gave birth to 2 kids with birth defects. This person had brain cancer. This person had breast cancer. This person, pancreatic. It was unbelievable. And I think that's when it really hit me hard on the connection on the toxics and how we need to get rid of the toxics, there's a lot of plastic that maybe we need, but there's a lot that is single use that's unnecessary. For Skip the Stuff, there's 40 billion single use utensils discarded annually in the US alone. More than half of those have never ever been used. That's equivalent to 10,000 full dump trucks full that are constantly being thrown into a landfill or littered into the streets or washed up in the ocean. It's unnecessary. So this is an exciting, easy bill. It's gotten both Democrat and Republican support. Democrats are the prime sponsors on this bill, but as Judith said, the toxics, it's scary when you think she said the 16,000 different chemicals make up plastic. 4,200 of those are known to be toxic to our health. 6% is globally regulated, which is just mind-boggling when you think about the fact that what we are putting in our mouth, going back to the EPR, going to anything that's plastic, it can all leach into our bodies. It can all contaminate us, both in the foods we eat, in the air we breathe, and certain communities are more bound to have the toxic exposure due to the amount of industry that's in certain areas. So Skip the Stuff is it's getting great support. So I think I've kind of wrapped up between everything that other people have said. Would love to answer any questions if people have any.
Any questions for Marta? All right, we're going to share these slides as well after, so you'll have all those great facts. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to jump in. I got an alert on my phone while Marta was talking, which is that Pepsi and Coca-Cola, there's a lawsuit right now to, okay, the headline is Pepsi Coca-Cola to blame for plastic waste crisis in the US Virgin Islands. That is, wow. I'm going to drop that into the Zoom chat if anybody else just came through the wire. So Judith, more stuff out there every day. So this lawsuit against Pepsi and Coke right now just came in the news.
And
Yeah.
I want to jump to what Joan just put, because that's a very basic thing that I didn't address. I have a case study for the town of Red Bank, which was one of the first town that I give credit for passing this past year their Skip the Stuff ordinance. And the amount of money that the businesses are saving, the happiness that the businesses, the pleasure that the businesses are now experiencing by not unnecessarily needing to give out unnecessary cost burdens, because more often than not, people are throwing away their cutlery, their condiments. People have a junk drawer like me full of unnecessary plastic spoons, or refrigerator full of those ketchup packets that we don't actually need. So thank you, Joan, for putting that in there, because this is a triple win between saving businesses money, saving the customers junk, and our health. Going back to the case study for Red Bank, there was a 94% reduction in the amount of cutlery and condiments that the businesses were giving out. Great quotes. I can throw that in the chat, or I think actually, Taylor, you have access to that you can share. I believe you're going to be doing that later.
It's like Heidi has another question, or is that an old hand?
It's a new question.
for it.
So like, what is the enforcement mechanism for these things? Because like, I know a restaurant owner who, with the straw ban, they said it would get so annoying, people asking for the straws and having to go out of their way for it, that they basically just don't follow the rules.
Yeah, I do think that the straw is a much harder ask than the cutlery. For cutlery, all you have to do is ask for it when you're doing takeout. I mean, at least personally, and a lot of the people I know do takeout, take it back to their homes, take it back to their businesses. They don't need the plastic stuff. So the enforcement is less of an issue. The good thing about having a state law versus the ordinances, the local ordinances, there's a wide range of penalties, somewhere between $25, $500 for first offense. One of the important things that we're waiting, so this bill passed out of Senate Environment back in October. It's eagerly awaiting to be heard in the Assembly, and one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we included was 180-day education, so businesses understand the benefits to them for not unnecessarily giving it out. There is going to be penalty. Those numbers are still being kind of, until it's actually in print, I don't want to say what those numbers will be. There will be probably $1,000 offense penalty, but the most important part is the 180-day of education, followed by warning first, then first offense, first penalty, second penalty, third penalty. I don't know if that answered your question, but the state law will preempt all the local ordinances.
So like, who's giving the warning?
The DEP will be in charge of that.
All right. Any other questions on the bills? All right, so we can go to the next, and we'll just wrap it up with kind of a review of the lobbying experience, facilitating a meeting. So like I said, mostly review at this point, but how a general lobby meeting flows is you'll have each group member introduce themselves, say where you live, especially if you're a constituent of the legislator. You'll really see them pipe up when you mention that. And depending on who you're meeting with, like I said, you might have some people in your group that are constituents, some that aren't, and that's totally fine. We do our best to match constituents or people by district as much as possible. Let's try to have the constituent take an active role in the meeting if they can. I actually, when I was at New Jersey Lobby Day in the fall, I jumped in on a meeting, not to lobby, but just to say hello to a legislator who represents my parents' district. And as soon as I said, you know, my parents live in your town, she went from like dead eyes to like, oh, I want to talk to you. So they really pay attention to their constituents, even though it was just my parents, not even me, in her district. So just something to note there. After introducing yourselves, you're gonna take on each one of the bills or one you know, main talking point. Remember the heart, head, and hand as we discussed earlier. And make sure you make note of the legislator's stance on the back of your sheet that we're going to provide. There'll be like a table that has each bill. I guess it's just 2 for this lobby day. And you'll be able to note any questions that they asked or if they gave you a firm commitment, yes or no. So we can have that intel moving forward. Don't forget to thank them for their time, even if the conversation didn't go exactly as you wanted it to. Super important. And leave behind, we're going to have fact sheets that are going to be leave behind for them to digest for later. If you're comfortable with it, ask for a photo, and so we can share those and have, you know, documentation from the day and show that we're doing this work. That is pretty much it for this slide, and we'll go to the last one now. Sometimes we have lobby teams ready to go for the training, sometimes we don't. In this case, we're still working on, or we've started meetings. We've got a few scheduled so far with the first few legislators. But until we have that, we won't break people into groups and decide who's going to meet with who based on district. So we're not going to have a chance to do that tonight, but that is that. And that's pretty much a wrap. Do we have other questions for myself, for Taylor, Marta, Judith, or the group?
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to do the little raise hand button. But for the Skip the Stuff Act, considering that the Department of Environmental Protection will be in charge of enforcing it, is there any other legislation in the works to maybe cross enforce that with like with anyone else, any other agencies?
Marta, I thought there was conversation with Department of Health because they're out there doing inspections. And maybe that's something that's still being hammered out. Is that where we are with that?
I think it is, but honestly, I think this is a bill that we don't have to worry as much about enforcement because of the benefits to the businesses. So that is the critical part. New York City passed this back in February of 23. The important thing is if we can get the word out to the businesses on the amount of money they are saving, that is the critical part, I think, more important to me than the enforcement, because some of these mom and pop places, honestly, if I have a 16-year-old kid who's working at a restaurant that accidentally or stupidly throws in a fork, I don't necessarily want the small mom and pop restaurant to be fined a huge amount. What I want is that business person, the owner of the restaurant, to politely harass my kid who gave out that fork, because it benefits them by not giving it out.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I want to add to that too, that I've seen the enforcement, I think it's a good question, really important, but I've seen a similar kind of question kind of result in policies not passing before. And it's unfortunate because, hey, even if 80% of businesses did this, right, that would be a massive improvement. Is that fair to say, Marta? Obviously, we want 100% of businesses following the law, but to me, it's not a reason to, like you said, not pass this.
Right. So in Red Bank, they did a very good job of, their green team actually did the good job of going door to door to the businesses, which enabled the businesses to understand and be more compliant. There were a handful that for one reason or another were not compliant. But in the 16 businesses accounted, that the number in my head is the 16 businesses that were compliant, because I didn't go to all 100 of the businesses. There was a over 1.5 million single-use cutlery reduction in just 16 annually. And so the green teams are doing a great job of going around. So I think it just also takes just every person with an interest to reinforce the significance of you not having a junk drawer full of stuff you don't want.
Thank you, guys.
Fabulous
Of course.
question.
Go ahead, Judith.
Yeah, so I have a comment and a quick question. Comment is that my husband was at the State House a little over a week ago and was told that Homeland Security has closed to the public the Capitol garage, which was being recommended to us, that they said that this was unsafe for the legislators. So I don't know the veracity of that, but that's what he was told at the State House by one of the staffers there. The question is for Judith, Judith here. I would really, I hope that in the information we're going to be sent, the facts about where in the body the plastics are showing up will be, because I've been reading about that over the years, and that for me is a big one for my kids and my grandkids and everybody, because we have a lot of cancer in the family, and a lot of family members who got cancer early because they were near sites that where there were chemicals. So it's it's a big family issue. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm very sorry to hear about your family experience. When I served at the EPA, I was very struck that my region was New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And Region 2 had more federal Superfund sites than any other region in the whole country. And, plastics are made from chemicals and fossil fuels. So there's a direct through line there in terms of all of the toxic waste sites that are plaguing our nation. I'm sure the health stuff will be front and center in conversations. I mean, when I talk to lawmakers that typically are not that interested in, say, wetlands protection or acid rain or climate change, they are asking me questions about plastics in the body. And one thing we recently did at Beyond Plastics at the suggestion of a volunteer is that if you go to the very top of our webpage, we have a chronological listing of all of the most recent peer-reviewed scientific papers on where plastics are being found in our bodies, both microplastics and nanoplastics. And I think it's important to recognize that the risk is just the physical nature of little pieces of plastic in our brain, in our heart arteries, different parts of our body, but also very often toxic chemicals hitchhike on the little pieces of plastic. So it's not just the physical threat, but even on the physical threat, I would really recommend you take a look at a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine that's on our website. The New England Journal of Medicine is the most respected medical publication in the country. Because we hear a lot from the plastics and chemical lobbyists. Well, yeah, there's plastics in our body, but how do we know it's doing any damage? Well, this article identified microplastics in our heart arteries. So not our heart itself, that was a different study. This identified in heart arteries and found that the microplastics attach to plaque And there was a significantly increased risk of heart attack, stroke, or premature death if you had microplastics attached to plaque. And then just in the last few weeks, some really sad, disturbing studies looking at Alzheimer's patients and found that people who died suffering with Alzheimer's had an average of 7 grams of microplastics in their brains. And 7 grams is the equivalent of 1 plastic spoon. So I encourage people to really talk to policymakers about the plastics and health connection and why we can't recycle our way out of the plastic pollution problem. We have to make less. And that will also benefit our brothers and sisters living in Louisiana, Texas, and Appalachia, who have the unfortunate experience of living near plastic production facilities. That's a different health risk from all the pollution from smokestacks, discharge pipes, and soil in Louisiana, Texas, and Appalachia. That is a really important environmental justice and environmental health issue.
Thank you.
I don't want to take up too much time. I couldn't do the hands up either. I'm sorry. Too much time for the group. But the image I have of much of the lobbying is going to be walking down the hall trying to catch legislators as they're on their ways to committee and stuff. For a person with mobility issues, this sounds almost dangerous, if not impossible to do. Is there something that we can do? I mean, I can walk up and down the hallways. I can walk to their offices. I've done lobbying in meetings. Is there some way we should address this if we're limited in what we're able to do?
Yeah, I can definitely take that. Thanks, Rita. Nice to meet you. We are working on getting a committee room reserved. The tricky thing is that we won't know if it's reserved or not until this coming week. But we are going to be meeting in the cafeteria first. So if it happens that we get a meeting with a legislator, we'll probably try and have them come to the cafeteria. But there will be, we will figure out a plan. I don't think everybody will be running around the State House. There'll be stationary areas to hold meetings, and we will take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Also with the parking lot, Marta and I went to the State House last Thursday, and I was able to park in the parking lot. So I'm not sure. I'll definitely double check with the State House early next week. There's a brand new security facility that you need to go through, but we were still able to park at the parking lot. So we'll make sure we have all the updates, and we'll send you all those updates via email.
Also, when I go to Trenton, I take the train, and then you can take an Uber or a cab. It's not that expensive from the Trenton train station to the State House.
Also, if you get there at 9, or a little bit before 9, you should be able to park along the road. Like before you get into the parking lot, there are areas where you can just park because committees won't start until 10. So you should be able to find some spots too if we come earlier.
For the security checkpoint, do we need our IDs?
Yes.
Okay. Would a passport happen to work by any chance? I lost my ID this week. So replacement.
That is I would assume so. Marta, Judith.
I would think that a passport is much better than a driver's license. I would think that would be good. It would just be a matter of you not wanting to lose it.
Yes.
Are there potential problems with this whole real ID issue as well?
Well, passport counts as real ID.
Mm-hmm.
So
I use my license, and it's not a real ID.
Okay, good.
I don't think they should say real ID. I mean, it's a real ID, but it's not the real ID that you need, the new one. But yeah, that passport should be okay.
And I would even think school IDs, because there's a lot of people who don't have a driver's license. Is that what you were just saying, Taylor?
Yes.
I would just hate for that to ruin the lobby day. So just wanted to make sure. All right, it is the top of the hour. Any last questions before we wrap? All right, thank you all for being here, and you can contact us with any questions, and thank you all for doing this great work, and have a good rest of your night. Take care.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
All right.
See you next week.
You guys-
All right.